Hello everyone again. We are back with another session of our YouTube podcast with, of course, our guest same as last time. Satvik is with us. Arun is also with us, who is of course our. There is a saying in Telugu called Akasha Ramanna. Basically, Arun is our Akasha Ramanna of semiconductor industry, the
You can
anonymous
say that.
expert, the unknown expert. Basically,
Yeah.
Akasha Raman is a moniker used if you want to keep yourself anonymous, but still be published. PV Narasimha Rao used to do that a lot to criticize Gandhi family, but that's a different thing. So yes, Arun is here, and of course our Abhivardhan is also here. So Satvik, Arun, and Abhivardhan will help us navigate through the various intricacies or perhaps the challenges of the newly sworn in Modi government in areas of defense tech, semiconductor tech, critical tech, AI policy, etc., etc., and how it will impact the larger diplomatic relations and its potential economic opportunities for India. So let's start with Satvik because his interest is mostly on, like, of course, India, China, US triangular defense, critical tech cooperation. So, how do you basically want to summarize the listeners or viewers the recently agreed like the fact sheet that came out as Jake Sullivan, who came to India to meet, of course, the Indian security establishment, Ajit Doval, Rajnath Singh, Prime Minister Modi, etc., etc. Uh, and the implications are, do you see any major changes in the last fact sheet and this
Mm.
fact sheet? I mean, the last ICT meeting and this ICT meeting, or is just a gradual upgrade of what happened last time? Is there,
Mhm.
as far as I can see, it's a continuity. It's a broad continuity. But apart
Yeah.
from that, what's the new story?
So this ICET, the ICET review, had been in the works for the last maybe 4 months. Like initially, Jake Sullivan was planned to come to India in like all the way in March, but that had been put off once due to the Israel-Gaza conflict, and then again due to flare-ups in the Israel-Gaza conflict. This was a ICET review that was a long time coming. It was frankly a bit overdue, but both countries have seemed to
Just
at
to
least make it a priority.
intervention, just sorry for small intervention for listener. Not only ICT, lot of other meetings have also been like indefinite delay. For example, quad meeting, etc., etc. So people are also looking off for when those meetings will happen.
Yeah.
So yes, Satvik, continue.
Yes, and one of the reasons why this is being delayed, and also so there's geopolitical incidents that kept getting in the way, but also it was a concern of like, is this too close to the Indian election? Like, because if there was to be a personnel change, that personnel change would very drastically shift the actual dynamics of ISET. ISET right now, as it has been set up, is actually, I would say it's a statement of confidence between Ajit Doval and Jake Sullivan, and their working relationship. So the fact that Ajit Doval came back as NSA and Jake Sullivan came here to greet him, um, that kind of like, I guess, like belays confidence in the relationship, and continuity in the relationship. And I think that's what we saw in a lot of the ISET stuff. Um, we saw a lot of expansion of U.S.-India joint research. For the first time, some Indian companies have been named in terms of cooperation with U.S. Defense tech. So General Atomics has been working with Indian AI startup A114 AI, and also been working with I think Third Eye Systems to set up a machine learning systems and also drone cooperation. Uh, so General Atomics has been the company that has been supplying the MQ-9 drones to India for aerial surveillance and everything. So this is kind of you see certain companies taking the lead from the U.S. side in, I guess, choosing specific defense startups in India to nurture in some way. And so we see some of that. And also, we see some increased cooperation in the space sector, civil space, especially when it comes to ISRO astronauts. So ISRO astronauts have selected to work with NASA and this one American company called Axiom Space to train them to go up to the International Space Station. which I think will be the first time Indian astronauts will be launching up into space and into the International Space Station, and that's happening with the cooperation of NASA and an American company. Also, the joint NASA ISRO NISAR probe, which is supposed to be the world's largest Earth observation satellite, is has been scheduled to launch, I think, later this year. And we saw some greater cooperation, especially when it comes to semiconductors, especially when it comes to the ORAN and telecommunications network semiconductors. So we see Qualcomm and Avenir funding cooperation with Bharti Airtel as well. And we also see greater initiatives in biotechnology as well, which is, I guess, like if you had to point to something new in this relationship, this increased focus on biotech would be that. And we also see, um, e- interestingly, a mention of critical mineral security partnership between the US and India, and cooperating on lithium mineral deposits. Interestingly, one of the core mineral deposits in India is found in Kashmir. So interesting that that even made it onto the sheet, considering how sensitive these things are. But so
Not only sensitive, actually there hasn't been any significant headway into that because the policy that government tried to actually auction or do something with it, there were not many bidders initially. I think they are going for another round. I don't know what's going to be the result of it. So it's kind of into a limbo, and still they made it into the document. That's
mhm,
actually very like interesting,
yeah.
but in a weird way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we see a lot of, I guess, continuity, like we see some new collaborations, new areas of cooperation, but we see largely continuity. And I think that's what everyone expects. If I could say one thing about the kind of overall tone of this tone of this ISET document is that it is very much government focused in the sense that it is a lot of government initiatives to push through either funding grants, research grants, or it's companies that governments are comfortable with, such as like General Atomics or Tata or all these big companies that are associated very strongly with their governments, being pushed to take some risk and doing some additional work. I don't think I see as much commercial to commercial ties purely for commercial benefit, but it seems like this relationship right now is being driven by security concerns and joint government initiatives.
But Satvik, do you see anything significant in terms of defense upgradation? For example, atomics thing. Do we know if has there been any like advancement in the agreement? Do we know what kind of like? Of course, many people say when they say tech transfer, it's not actually tech transfer.
Yeah,
But what is the intricacies of those whatever little tech transfer we know, especially process of the manufacturing
yeah,
process? I think mostly that is where the tech transfer is happening.
yeah.
And any other such defense, for example, there was what is it called? Just a second. Index. Just a second. Let me. This
Indus
initiative.
X.
Yeah, Indus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Indus
Yeah.
initiative. Is there anything happening? Exciting things happening over there? Those kind of
Yeah.
things.
So when it comes to tech transfer, I'll use the GE deal as an example, right? So you have General Electric's F414 jet engine. That it's a very advanced engine. People have been trying to get it. This engine tech has not really been even given to U.S. ally countries like Japan. This was I think there was supposed to be 80% tech transfer to the U.S. I think that was the agreement. I'm not fully sure the exact number. But what I guess like the when it comes to the intricacies of tech transfer on this scale, and it's like on complicated systems like this, you have the assembly, and you also have blueprints, and then you have manufacturing, basic. And when it comes to, let's say, General Electric, they have their blueprints for the actual engine, and that's actually their intellectual property. That's the thing that they could transfer. So that is the thing that may be able to be transferred to India, but they themselves have a key network of suppliers within the US that provide them, like, let's say, fan blades, or that provide them like gaskets or stuff like that. And that's a whole network that hundreds of companies get involved in that. And those hundreds of companies have their own IP. They have their own technology that is sensitive and XYZ. And so if you get the larger tech transfer, let's say from General Electric to India, you still don't get that that core manufacturing tech transfer by and large. There is some things that General Electric does manufacture, no doubt, but these things that like the 20%, the critical 20% that you really need, that finds more difficulty to be transferred. That I think will be something that has to be set up as confidence building measures. Like, if Indian tech companies and if Indian suppliers can slowly try to get themselves involved into a local supply chain, maybe some of these tech transfers can happen like on a business to business level. You can purchase this technology or something like that. Uh, but until there is at least that expression of confidence, because if GE gives this and gives it to India, and India was like, okay, we want to get local manufacturing, but then there's a lot of subpar local manufacturing that not only hurts Indian IP brand image, that also hurts GE. So they're also going to be very sensitive and giving access to their network of suppliers as well. So like there needs to be that confidence building, and I don't that will take time. That'll take years and years of work.
So let's come to Arun. So Arun, in
Y-
continuation to what Satvik said, and of course in continuation to what we discussed last time on semiconductors, can you expand upon, is has there been any significant new development with regards to semiconductor supply chains, and especially, I mean, what new things could you find in this fact sheet? Beyond that, also, like any new developments since our last meeting, and of course, can you also expand upon the critical minerals part of semiconductor chains? Yes.
yeah, so I think, as you guys said, some specifics have started to come out, like the names of the companies. I guess the 114 AI is a bit more related to UAV kind of drone kind of cooperation. I'm not sure how much of that is actual semiconductor, though it is actually listed under semiconductors, maybe. The third eye tech definitely is most likely much more on semiconductors, and that's a company whose name has been there in the media for a while. In fact, I think the first set of three companies which won the DLI incentives from MeiTY had third eye tech, right? That's why I think Vrinda Kapoor or somebody is probably the CEO, if I remember it right. So that's a name that has been around for a while. So these names have started coming out, which is probably the and I think, as Satvik was saying, that companies and areas, specific areas which the governments are comfortable with in terms of a cooperation, right? That's what seems to be happening, instead of like an umbrella or a very wide range of cooperation. They're probably picking very specific areas and looking at how it pans out. Now, I just want to zoom out a little bit, though it's nothing new, but just wanted to look at the whole thing from a zoomed out perspective. See, US, or let's say when it comes to US China semiconductor war, there are two things which are of importance for the US, right? One is the commercial side of it, where US has steadily lost the percentage of manufacturing that happens on its soil. Manufacturing, it still is very strong in terms of design, IPs, and so on, but the manufacturing, especially the wafer fab, on its soil, it's been steadily losing it. So getting that back is one major goal that US has. And second, of course, is the defense related or the strategic or security related aspects of it. Now, in the commercial aspect of what the US is trying to gain back, you can again divide it into three, at a high level, three or four, well, I would say four major segments. One is the equipment manufacturing. Second is the materials and supply chain, for example, the starting wafers and chemicals and things like that. Third is the actual wafer fabrication, and fourth is the packaging. It seems to me that US is not necessarily too keen on it directly helping India in two of them, which is the equipment manufacturing as well as the wafer fab itself. Whereas the other two aspects, One is the materials aspect and the or the supply chain aspect, and the last being the packaging aspect. It probably is open to helping India. So the packaging aspect, the example being Micron. Whereas in the other two, the wafer fab and things like that, it probably is taking a line where if India itself is getting into a strategic cooperation with Taiwan or any other nation which US doesn't have a complaint about, then let it happen. But the US itself, I mean, they may not spoil the game for India, but at the same time, they are not going to go out of the way to help India. So this is the way I see it. When it comes to equipment manufacturing, it's not yet clear, and India is also way too early in terms of there's no specific policy or there's no major push yet. And similarly, when it comes to the materials and supply chain, also very likely that in the next incentive scheme or incentive package that the government of India might release, there might be some push for localizing some of the chemicals and
Yeah.
other aspects of the supply chain. So this is what is from the commercial standpoint of view, I see it as a 50-50 cooperation from the US. They are okay with India picking up packaging. They are kind of neutral to India, possibly picking up a wafer fab and things like that, and even some aspects of the supply chain. Equipment, I kind of doubt it if US will be too happy if ASMLs and applied materials start coming up in India, but we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
When it comes to the strategic and the security cooperation, the second bigger umbrella, there it looks like the US is open to very specific areas, sort of identifying some specific cases and trying to cooperate in that through private companies with, of course, some sort of a government overseeing those companies. So this
Yeah.
is again, whatever I just said probably is nothing new. It's not related to the latest fact sheet, but I
Mm.
just feel that especially after seeing some of these names come out, I think this is the overall this is the overall strategy that they've followed so far. Let me briefly stop there for comments.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
would also like to
just
add that I would
yes.
also like to add that when you have like areas such as semiconductor, let's say equipment manufacturing, right? See, that is even areas right now that like countries like China are still trying to catch up and do that. So, you see someone who is much more advanced in manufacturing semiconductors in India, and China is still having to catch up and do things with that. So, it's still like, it's still a ways off in terms of, first, so you first just set up an AT&P facility, have that at least first. At least it's a demonstration of confidence. You need to at least demonstrate that you can do these things. Then you'll get some of the more high value add stuff, such as like equipment manufacturing. I mean, but I would say that like companies such as Lam and Applied Materials have offices in India, but they're more GCCs. They're not actual manufacturing or anything like that. But there are like talent. There is investments in talent in India. That's like one of the key things that they're doing. But that will take much longer time to actually actualize into something like that. And when it comes to, I guess, select defense cooperation, I would also like to remind is that the U.S. has very strict laws on defense supply chains, even internally. Like what companies, what countries can the U.S. even work with, and U.S. companies work with. And this has actually been not just India, but this has also been a persistent problem through AUKUS as well. It's been affecting countries that the U.S. has very strong relationships with, such as Australia and the UK. So there is like structural barriers in the U.S. that actually prevent greater cooperation between India and US. Not saying that like if these weren't there that there'd be big meshing, but at least like there are just as like just like in India, there are a lot of things that make someone scratch their head and beat their head in. Similar things happen in the US. Like one example is like civil space cooperation. Um, one of the what's it one of the like testing kits and everything sent to help civil space capabilities in India. That's a controlled part of part of I think ITAR or some other export regime. And the US and India have been want to cooperate in civil space, but you have legislation that's blocking these kinds of testing kits or these other kinds of key materials. So like these are still I guess structural blocks.
I think I want to just continue on what some of the things Satvik said and what Arun said. So, Arun, in continuity, recently last week only I have read the report that Chinese semiconductor majors like Shanghai Ocean Semiconductor, and there are other companies who are withdrawing their IPOs. I mean applications for semiconductor, which are mostly semiconductor companies. And in the last 3 years, it seems like over 20,000 semiconductor projects have gone like basically nowhere. Basically, they are insolvent at the moment. So
Yeah, yeah,
so
please go ahead.
is this a regular story, or is there something to be seen here? That is China punching way above its weight at the moment?
It's no, well, it's in a way it's a regular story. So again, you guys are probably much more following up on the geopolitics of this, but from what I understand, see, if you go back in a little bit of history, uh 2018-ish is when the Trump government first started imposing a lot of restrictions and things like that.
Yeah, export
uh,
controls, etc.
Export controls and things like that. At that time, China's response was it did retaliate. I mean, I believe I am again. These are all just reading knowledge for me. It's not really my field, but it did retaliate with certain reverse controls and things like that. Though not necessarily in semiconductors, right? It still needed imports. It still had a lot of dependency on US semiconductor import and things like that. um but it did retaliate in other ways and things like that. But later in 2020 21ish, I believe those sort of sanctions, the US and China had a little discussion or whatever, and then the mode sort of changed. And then again, with Biden administration starting to do these export controls, now probably China isn't retaliating in that way. They are probably looking more in terms of, let's focus more on how we get our self sufficiency much better. It could be partly because they cannot really do much with still dependencies on US for a lot of semiconductor imports. It could also be a realization that this is going to be a long game, and so we no point in doing sort of temporary or reactionary mode. We have a long term plan. And the second aspect of this whole thing is that I mean, from an economic standpoint of view also, people tell that China is much more positioned to keep throwing money at this problem compared to even US, because of it's the general debt.
Because state controls the capital, basically.
Correct, and state controls the capital plus their overall debt. I mean, US is much more in debt compared to China, and those kind of comparisons. So the point is that these companies going bust. In fact, you said last 3 years, 20,000. I think the Tom's Hardware also had a report of this. June 17th, if I remember it right. But it's not just 3 years. Even before that, the so-called big fund, there have been cases of things going bust. What is now coming in the news is YMTC, the Chinese memory company. Those guys had gone big time bust over a few years, and then they got back some investors and state funding and so on, and now they are supposed to be doing reasonably well in 3D NAND and things like that. So
Yeah.
the point is that definitely this is not a model that India or somebody can emulate. We don't have this kind of money to throw at the problem and then hit and miss, and then you recalculate and reinvest and things like that. But
Mm.
somehow looks like China is able to do it. They are, the recent one is $47 billion. Before that, if you add up all the numbers, it probably goes above 100 billion, 140 billion or something like that, and they still have $47 billion to throw at this problem, and every 1 or 2 years they do this. A lot of companies register. I suspect, by the way, the numbers that you have, many of those companies might also be design startups,
Yeah.
which are going bust. Some of them could be manufacturing in terms of fabs, bigger or smaller fabs. Some of them could also be attempts at equipment manufacturing. So it's an umbrella of many of these. And what seems to be happening is that you have 100 of them coming up and 80 or 90 of them going bust, but probably those 10 or 15 or 20 surviving, and they are helping China
Yeah.
still make a
Yeah.
progress. I'll just
Yeah.
say
And
one last, yeah, sorry, Sat. Yeah, I'll just say one last point for just a thought process, and then stop for further comments. interestingly, the Semiconductor Industry Association of America, they keep bringing out these reports sometimes in the name of state of the industry report. Most recently, they have brought up something called a resilience report on how US can gain back their market share and things like that. And they, in 2018 or something, they showed a data saying that China owns about 16% of wafer fab market share on its soil. By 2020, they're already started showing 21%. And the most recent 2022, it shows 24%, even bigger than Taiwan. It might not be by revenue, it might be by volume, but still, it is either SIA is exaggerating because they want the CHIPS Act money, or if there is real truth in it, it's an unbelievable or it's a very, very strange growth in spite of the mature nodes being so choked, that these guys are able to go up from 16 or 18% to 24% in wafer fab manufacturing share within a span of 6 years or 7 years or something. So the
Yeah.
point being that, it might not be commensurate to the money that they throw at it, but they are definitely making progress. Let me
Yeah.
stop here, and yeah, Satvik
Yeah,
had something.
basically
I
China is throwing the money at the scale, and that scale is providing, even though like in terms of proportion of the share of the investments, it's low, but in absolute terms, the results themselves are too big to ignore
Right,
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean,
Satvik.
I mean, what the government policy does, it signals investors and it signals other forms of private capital to invest in these things. And I think what China really tries to do uh, with these initiatives is managed competition. In that, you have all these like, let's say you have 100 companies, 90 go bust. Well, the IP that those 90 companies made and the research that these made is going to get bought up by the remaining 10, and the employees of those remaining people get hired by the remaining 10 as well. So like there is this like that like sure it may be wasted, it may be a wasted business opportunity, but the assets you gain from that are still retained. And I think that that is the real strength. And if anything, like um, that kind of shows that like I see a lot of people talking in India saying that we have these big conglomerates and they're going to be at the forefront of everything, and they're going to be the one that really do these things. Sure, maybe in some of these high capital, high intensive things, but this kind of shows like the importance of smaller industry to actually really do the I guess the amelioration of talent and IP to
I
do
mean,
that.
Reliance Jio, the whole telecommunication expansion model of Reliance Jio has been acquisition of like small tech, telecom tech by the small companies. And I
Hmm.
think I'm not an expert, but whatever the news I read, Reliance Jio keep on like absorbing the small companies into its larger. They just buy them out basically, and that is how it absorbs the whole new. Even for the 6G research, that is the model. I think Reliance is following.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the ISET stuff around ISIT. I don't know if this was in the actual fact sheet itself, but like, afterwards there was also like a major industry roundtable that brought in U.S. industry, so the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, uh, and it had representatives from like from let's say J Aerospace, Holtec, Taylor Mahan, General Atomics,
And
but
I'm sure India America Business Forum is also part of this initiative. Like that takes care of all
uh,
this basically.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and like the Indian side had representatives from PALE, Third Eye Tech,
OSIBC, yeah.
Bharat Forge,
Yeah.
Centum, Tata, Tejas, like all these. So like there's an explicit like there are explicit efforts to connect these businesses to start working together. That's why you see like Tejas Systems being I guess like a Tata's version of like it wants to be Tata's version of Ericsson or something that like of course right now it uses imported components, but like as Tata makes its own semiconductors and makes its own designs, these will be like innovations that like trying to get an independent tech stack.
So Abhi, I want to talk more different perspective of like the things that Satvik and Arun has said. Now, there at one level you have the tech cooperation. Of course, you can ask whatever you want to ask from the US, and of course, it can give whatever it can within its limitations, and there is expectation all that. But beyond that, you have to also see what is the absorption capacity of the Indian system itself, right? Like be it defense tech or like any other tech, what is the execution capacity, what is the absorption capacity, and Where does it lies with the pace of the security threat you face, especially? And the events in the last 3 months, especially in the couple of weeks, has made it even
Yeah,
more like more I mean, I don't think it's even in the realm of speculation anymore. Like there is something happening, but no one knows what's happening
hmm.
at the moment,
What's happening?
especially since Prime Minister's Bhutan visit in the mid poll season. Since then, like he actually responded to Taiwanese president's tweet. Taiwanese president is actually defending India's response very aggressively in international media. Beyond that, then
Hmm.
you see all the US delegation coming in, like the whole hierarchy that we are seeing. And I don't think it is just normal politics. There is a larger
Yeah,
messaging there. And even
yeah.
as this messaging happens, and Xi Jinping has 3 4 years of window left before the next Chinese Party Congress and the next schedule for the nomination of Chinese president opens up. So within these 3 4 years of the immediate threat, you see, of course, in the long term, there is a saying everyone is dead. Even if we may like actually do whatever we can in terms of absorbing all this tech, where do you see all this actually fitting in the next 3 4 years of Indian planning, basically?
Right. So, see, execution is a huge problem in India, right? I mean, you need state governments and central government in cohesion, ensuring that in certain geographies you get the things done, right? For example, the UP government is fantastically and very amateurly interested in some Japan Korea industrial area in Noida or Greater Noida. They want to have that city and they want to establish that. Congratulations, they can try that. I think I can give you the example of how they're trying to do it in AI, and I see a certain similarities in other aspects as well. Okay, so I will generally talk about AI, I know, but I'll tell you why it matters. So they came up with a report with this, they called it the India AI Mission Report, expert group report in October last year. Okay, they say they will establish centers of excellence and they'll partner between MeiTY and centers of excellence and the universities, right? Now, centers of excellence could be funded by the universities or the UGC or maybe some private company like GitHub just partnered with Infosys and they launched something like a center of excellence just recently. The GitHub guy, CEO, I think he came to India. The problem is for any technology policy to become successful, the thing is, what is a strategy at the end of the day? A strategy is something like something which is sublime. So a strategy is a short term thing which you try to implement for any long term stable goals. And uh, even if you see technology policy, it's always about the strategic purpose of geographies. I mean, you can talk about international cooperation on technology and all that stuff. Like, everyone says you need cooperation and an international treaty on AI and all that. But the problem is, without a domestic understanding, you can't go ahead. And I think that's the reason why capacity issues have to be dealt very importantly. For example, if you look at even AI, the thing is that smaller countries like Estonia and Singapore have been much efficient in implementing an AI strategy. They might have been good in semiconductors and others as well. I don't know. That's another thing to look forward to, because Arun might know better than me on whether, even Dubai has been very good on AI policy, even AI for AI startups. So that's another thing altogether. So I think capacity is a huge issue, number one, but uh, they have to ensure that beyond the political economy, the state governments are actually working in cooperation. If they need a urban model, as it was suggested, that combining certain rural and urban capacities together, do it. But you need industrial areas which are delivering results. As like I completely agree with Arun and Satvik that you have to come up with some basic deliverables before even saying okay fine you have certain, because if you don't show your capacity, you can't solve the problem. And right now, of course, on royalties and other things regarding TOT, of course, there will be certain things to compromise upon. I think it was in, I think, long back in August or September last year. I think we were having a space, and I think even Satvik was there. It was on Twitter X maybe. So Krishnan, I think, pointed it out that a lot of chip companies in Bengaluru itself, uh, I think a lot of them are not even properly, having their own IPs. They are like having some TOT agreements on a lot of American known chip IPs, right? So we need to define fine, okay, and it has to be done sooner. I must I must at least appreciate for the fact that at least on that implementation note, Ashwini Vaishnav is trying very hard. The problem is not with the minister. The problem is a bit that maybe a ministry which is focusing on AI, IT, and electronics and industry tech at the same time is just fizzled with too much work, which itself explains lack of bureaucratic capacity. But I think I can definitely discuss on AI in detail if
Yeah.
everyone wants.
I
Yeah.
Maybe
mean,
Satvik can up on AI first.
Yes.
my only I guess like my brief comment on Vaishnav is that like he may be doing a lot, but I think that my personal preference would be if you're going to have a minister covering railways, MeiTY, and IB at the same time, that's too much. You need to assign a different minister. You need to because ministry MeiTY itself, if you're going to do a whole industrial policy scheme, you need a dedicated minister just for that. You can't have someone shift their attention between that and that because one big complaints that companies have is that getting access to ministers is difficult. Mainly because they're busy people. They have local politics to deal with. They have their own subordinates, administration,
But
and they have
Satvik, you have to also see the brighter part of it. He got the third ministry as a lightweight ministry like INB before he had telecom. So
yeah
that was
yeah
even worse
now.
actually. That was even worse.
Uh,
Yeah, but
to
now
add to
now you have what's his face, Aditya Scindia, as telecom minister.
Yeah,
well,
and I think INB people emphasize INB too much. INB is mostly MOS work unless there is some big policy change or some big communication disaster, something is happening. Otherwise, I think technically he is handling only two ministries, but those two are big in themselves actually. So
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think, and this is an opinion that I've had for years, right? And now also consider that Ashwini's junior minister is no more Rajiv Chandrasekhar, or at least had some semiconductor background. It is Yatin Prasada. See, I think the one of the key things is that somehow it is not yet drilled down the heads of the higher ups there that MeiTY is so huge. And Satvik was also pointing out, it has itself so many subdomains, right? I mean, the AI policy will be under it, and some of the data privacy, DPDP, whatever, it will be under it, and semiconductors, of course, and eventually probably quantum also. Right now, quantum is probably under the Department of Science and Technology, but once it gets into a commercial mode, even quantum will be probably under MeiTY or something related. So it has, and it's the modern era. You can't still be in your 2000s, or 90s, and say that MeiTY is only so small. It's not just anymore simple electronics. So I just don't see that kind of an importance or realization given to that ministry. I mean, just as a on a kind of a lighter note, if you even look at the order in which the ministers took oath, right? Ashwini was like way down the order. So that kind of shows that's the kind of importance that MeiTY gets, and I think it's high time that it gets a dedicated minister.
no,
But
no,
anyway,
I think that has got nothing to do with that. It's basically depending on the
uh,
political heft or like.
could be,
I
could
think,
be, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Ashwin
yeah.
is
I
basically what is the Ashwini's importance in the Modi cabinet basically? He is like the I think the way I understand it, Modi thinks he is the most competent guy with most challenges. Basically, he's the one who Modi trusts basically with everything. It's just
Right.
that I think Modi or I think Ashwini Vaishnav himself has made his own work complicated by not having a dedicated MOS for the passenger railways basically. Had he fixed that part, I think the whole bad PR part of Ashwini could have been taken care of itself and he could have focused more in the other aspects. I think his energy is going in addressing the PR issue of railways then actually because I
and
don't think he's bad for the
yeah,
rest of the stuff.
and sadly, I really feel bad that the way his marketing team is kind of showing him as some marketing expert or product manager. He's not a product manager. He's a academic specialist. He's a nerd. I really like him. Like there was an interview he had with Tamanna Imandar and Inamdar, and he was explaining everything. Like he was explaining telecom equipment, he was explaining chips, he was explaining parts of AI and data, and he was doing it so nicely. That's why I say that he's he's a nerd. He's a specialist. I respect him. I think. And see, I completely agree with Satvik and Arun. MeiTY is more like MeiTY is more like that 1997 telecom policy thing, like the IT Act era, like the very old conception. Like, so if you look at the MeiTY's whole structure, you go to their website, they have so many PSUs, so many statutory bodies. Then partially they're also affiliated with telecom regulation, TRAI, which is under Ministry of Communications. Although in my view, people can disagree with me. I think Sindhya might be a proactive minister for telecom. Let us see how he does it for now. Let us see, because he did some work in civil aviation. Again, demerits exist, and that's a different matter. But I'm not hopeful when it comes to the MOS of MeiTY. But what can we say? I think it needs a breakup in future. Maybe a emerging technologies ministry could be there. Like,
Mm.
like Aditya said, maybe railways might be needing a breakup, focusing on
Yeah.
HSR, semi HSR, and Vande Bharat and all those with
I think
R&D
the
and all.
whole reason why Ashwini's energy is sucking up is like not having a dedicated MOS for the passenger railways part, basically. Like
Yeah.
if someone can take care of the passenger railways part of railways, Ashwini Vaishnav can actually focus on the uh, tech or the capacity expansion part of both MeiTY and railways. He's just going around to Balasore and Calcutta to announce ex gratia for the dead victims of railway accidents, then sitting in the office and sorting out the plans for the next semiconductor package or something. So that is the part, right? You need to have some dedicated MOS for those parts of
Yeah.
I mean, it's
When it
basically the down. Yes, yes, Satvik.
I mean, I would also think that like one of the things that has shifted recently, especially when it comes to MeiTY and their kind of like their pet projects, the DPDPA, the Digital Competition Act, and Digital India Bill, is that previously, since it was a majority government, the actual formation and the public comment, the private and public commentary on these bills were handled mainly within the ministries itself. Whereas now you're going to have to do with parliamentary committees, and so you can't just be leading this through a specific ministry anymore. This has to be taken into parliament, and that is going to complicate things. I think like when it comes to like maybe overall structures of tech policy, that itself is may not be difficult to actually pass, but like the debate over it will be something that either becomes a political issue, or it may be something that we're going to see like returns to more lobbying or some other equivalent of that.
I personally think beyond social reform legislation and the contagious ones like discom, land and labor, I don't think these things beyond the parliamentary ruckus, I don't think they will be blocked that much. But let's
Yeah,
see how that
there will be
goes.
at least be debated.
Because yeah,
Yeah,
at least of course it will be
yeah, at least
debated.
the debate. Yeah, and I think that recent tweet from the INC, for whatever reason, Kerala Congress handle seems to be much more active. Those guys going after the EV policy, right? I mean, probably one day they're probably going to put a tweet out on the semiconductor policy and incentives
No,
also.
no,
So
even that happened, right? They are going after the microns subsidies and they are saying it's not generating enough
yes, yeah,
jobs.
but that was only part of it. But the whole policy incentive and all, they might. So the point is that unlike the last 5 years, of course, let's forget about 2014 to 19, because many of these policies were not there in that also. But 2019 to 2024, when these policies were actually there and being implemented, somehow the Congress side, the opposition side in general was mostly silent. Their only complaint was that it's been given to states of BJP ruled states, going all of them are going to Gujarat and things like that. But now they seem to slowly start, it almost as though many of these policies existed for long, or what the government was doing for long, the Congress has suddenly woken up it and they've started reading the policies now. That's what it almost appears like. So we may see interesting times for the next few years in some of
But
these
at
things
least the
being much more
Congress seems
debated.
interested in policy. That's a good development.
That is a good sign. In fact, that is a
Yeah,
good sign, and some sort of a churn happening, and
yeah,
government actually being much more alert, and putting some more focus on that, right? Because now you realize suddenly that you can't just sit in a press conference and be not prepared. So that in some sense, that's a good thing.
yeah,
But Arun,
absolutely.
how do you see the this part of the debate where like these big PLI packages are seen as benefiting the corporates than job generating parts? Because to be
See,
honest, most of the PLI
yeah,
things are the capital intensive part, and
Yeah,
capital intensive
exactly,
and
right.
strategic sectors can't be job generating, right? They have strategic
Exactly,
implications.
exactly the point. You can't, not every tech job or not every company or not every tech is job focused. You will have across the spectrum, you will have companies or initiatives which will generate many more jobs but pay you not too much. You will also have rather high paying but not too many jobs. This definitely not, the job generation is definitely not the only prism or the main prism to look at semiconductor companies or investments that are going to come, right? Now
Right.
within that, Satvik, you had a point to make, or?
Yeah. I mean, I just like to put the comparison to China, in the sense that when China got vehicle manufacturing, a lot of it was initially base assembly that didn't employ a lot of people, but
Right.
after time they started getting local suppliers, local networks, and that is the
Exactly.
actual thing that employs mass people. And that's
Exactly.
why these things such as these semiconductors, right? These fabs may be employing, a small amount of people, but once you actually set them up and they get these local networks, the gas suppliers, the wafer suppliers, or the you know, all the other things that actually need to be components for these fabs, those are the things that will generate the jobs. And
Yeah.
that'll be something for Indian companies to just really compete on. If they're not willing to compete on this, then I don't know, like, does India really deserve even like having this kind of great power ambitions? Like, if you're not willing to compete and put your blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Exactly
Yeah,
the
I think.
point, right? I mean, yeah, these do generate many more indirect jobs and indirect opportunities, and it is both for the Indian investors as well as a little bit of policy help from the government to make sure that many of these supply chains are localized, either completely or at least partially. And just one final point in terms of the complaint about, first of all, PLI is completely different. PLIs are mostly catered to actually job generating companies, for example mobile assembly and more or less the last mile job. So I mean last mile aspects of that industry, and they are job generating. The semiconductor policies are not PLIs, are not necessarily depending on the production linked incentives. So there, the first investment, I would say, there is some merit in sort of saying that 70% of incentive that is given completely goes to an American company, which is Micron. But my point has been that that was the icebreaker. Whether it might not, I mean, whether it was officially part of ISET or not, it definitely was part of highest level sort of NSA level discussion between India and US, or G to G kind of a discussion, eventually going into a Micron investing in India. And that was the icebreaker for, that was a confidence building, as I think Satu was also pointing out. You have to first show to the world that you are serious about actually giving out that 70%, 50% from center and 20% from the state. You have to show to the world that not just your central government but even some of your state governments are actually serious and up to the word, up to the mark in the on the word that they say. And then after that, if you see the other three projects that got approved, two more OSATs, one of CG Power and the other of Tata in Assam, they are both Indian companies. And finally, the big fab, the 11,000 or 11 billion dollar fab, it's again Tata, which is Indian, right? So, you know, in my opinion, the fact that the icebreaker was an American company, I think is sort of compensated more than enough by the fact that the next three were Indian,
Yeah.
and one of them included a fab. So that's the way
But
I
I
would look at
think one good thing is at least the major. I mean, of course, Nitish Kumar won't care about these things. He has other priorities. But the other major allies basically understands these things. The
it. Yes.
BJP and Chandrababu Naidu political differences might be some local political related, but at the larger policy level, I don't see major disagreements between them,
If I
especially
remember
not
it
in.
right, Chandrababu Naidu was 2006, 2007 when there was this effort of semi Fab City or something. I think Chandrababu Naidu was the one who was trying to get it in the erstwhile Andhra
Maybe
Pradesh.
it's good if Modi and Ashwini Vaishnav can take some of the these plans to maybe Andhra Pradesh and diversify a bit. Maybe political rhetoric will dilute a bit due to that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
good to diversify some of these plans, so it's not entirely
definitely.
a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that Gujarat, they have to start looking at beyond Gujarat for a couple of reasons, right? One, of course, the political aspect of it and all of that. Second, also the risk aspect of it. I mean, another, whatever reason one plays, I mean, you don't want to put all your eggs in the same basket, right? You definitely should start diversifying. Of course, Assam was a bit of an attempt at that, but the next fab, I really hope they look beyond Gujarat. The reason why I believe they are focusing on some of that, I mean, is that Gujarat, the Dholera is sort of a ready-made facilities there. You have the water, like an artificial canal sort of a thing supplying water, and there are power generating stations in that Dholera smart city itself, so you don't have to worry only about the state supply. So you have backup power and all of that. So that is, and compare that to, I'll just give this one example. Compare that to, for example, initially there was talks of one of the fabs being the ISMC one being approved in Mysore. Now look at it this way, right? I mean, all these years, though of course eventually did not get approved, the whole proposal itself is now broken. But there was no, nothing started in terms of the government actually trying to, what is the plan to get water into that piece of land. I mean, you probably have to lay a direct supply from the KSR dam or something, or any of the other infrastructure. Nothing was discussed, nothing was moving forward. Compared to that, in Dolera Smart City, you already have some of these things being already set up. So this is probably the reason why the central government is also pushing again and again to the same place. But they somehow had to come out of this mentality and come out of this mindset that push everything to one place.
I
Maybe start
personally,
developing another, yeah, ready-made facility elsewhere and then start pushing it there also.
yeah, yeah.
I also
The
think that
one
when it
thing,
comes to these kind of states, a lot of these states that have, like, Gujarat is a state that has a long history of doing business and has a long history of trying to encourage industry. So, similar things for Tamil Nadu, some similar things for Karnataka. Like, they have at least a record in this, and they know that, like, yeah, even some of the more even some of the more, I guess, financially profligate governments know that at least that this is something that is a strength for their state. For a lot of states that don't have these similar industries, that don't haven't been able to do this is still not some, like, doing something like this is still perceived as a risk. So if the role of the government is to be anything, it's going to have to mitigate that risk and make sure that, you know that, like, a lot of these governments that are risk averse, that say, like, to either liberalizing their discoms, or, you know getting away from this free electricity promise that they always give. If it really requires the things that are, like, they need to do this, is that they need to demonstrate that, despite, like, despite doing this, that will not punish you in the end, by you, because you'll get, this investment or this industry to come in. Like, there needs to be at least an effort to at least dissuade.
and you know what,
More.
Satvik, that is where exactly I think focusing on the East Coast can be quite helpful, because the liberalization of discom was done by Navin Patnaik in Odisha actually. So there is a bipartisan consensus on some of these issues there. So you won't see any political roadblock if actually the East Coast is focused. Now that you have Chandrababu Naidu and your own government in Odisha, of course, I don't think the government would have mattered, even if it's BJP or BJD in Odisha. But now that you have two actually quite economically sensible governments in the East Coast, you can actually go for some of these things and diversify some of the risk. And it can also work as a catalyst to actually enhance the importance of East Coast itself after the downfall of Kolkata since last few decades. Actually, I mean, this is the one way to boost the East Coast, and of course, Sachik personally would be happy about it also. So that's a different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still going to be tweeting, like, setting up a greenfield city in Konasima. Well, let that be our Pearl River.
Yeah. Uh, but beyond this also, Satvik, I want to go back to the ISET part.
Yeah.
Now, how do you see the continuity of ISET? I mean, they also like with as an extension now they have also mentioned India, South Korea, US trilateral technology talk as part of it, and in addition, they have also mentioned other multilateral, not I would say rather plurilateral initiative like Track 1.5, pharmaceutical supply chain consortium, BioFi, and it was done just recently on June 5th with of course, Japan is also part of it, and European
Right.
Commission is also part of it, and they talk about
Yeah.
working in secure supply chains for APIs, and of course R&D in those areas. So how do
Hmm.
you see, how do you think these different initiative work in tandem, and where do they differ? Because if I remember correctly, in the last few years there has been a separate such plurilaterals for even 6G research, the I think
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
diversify away from the Huawei's threat in the telecom equipment areas, and you have
Hmm.
many such plurilateral that has been emerging. So
Yeah. I mean, I for these, I guess like these plurilaterals, I'm most bullish on the biopharmaceutical one because this is something that India has an explicit, has an existing industry, and it's also these critically for not just for the US, but you have these countries like Korea, Japan, European Union. They also recognize India's own competencies in biopharm. That there is at least some when COVID happened, all these vaccinations came out of India, all these medicines came out of India. There is an actual implicit recognition that even if like let's say tech companies, Japanese or Korean tech companies may be wary of India in some vague fashion, that at least their pharma companies at least know that there is an existing supply chain that is robust. Yeah. So I think I'm actually kind of positive on this. And when it comes to this, I guess like the US rock uh, India trilateral, yeah, I think what I mean, this is my read on it, so I don't know if this is like a larger, like more in or accurate one, but this is like I think this is the US trying to get other countries to get confidence building in India as well because like one of the issues in getting let's say the semicon right, so when there was like the semicon India last year, there was a lot of interest from Taiwanese companies, and that they use now you see the results from this getting PSMC, and a lot of there's probably going to be some more being announced soon actually, and you also see Foxconn selling their local assembly units to Tata and everything. And so you see something as a result of that, but the Korean presence at that was actually quite low, and now the big effort to get in the next Semicon India happening in September is to get a lot of Korean companies to come in and set up NAND facilities here in India. So in order to do that, they need these kinds of, I guess, high level engagements in order to get like, because just like Tata is in India, there's Samsung in South Korea. There's like they're very very government affiliated. Like policy making on a private level does not happen with these big companies. Without these big companies. So I think that there is at least some kind of effort to get that there. And from what I've been seeing in Semicon India, there's actually going to be a lot of explosion of interest because well, interestingly, the venue that they booked for Semicon India has been proving too small. They're going to have to shift that venue, which I've heard. That like they're probably going to get a bigger one. Uh,
that's good news. I mean,
yeah,
I just don't understand why don't government, like whenever you have such a big occasion, why don't government make the Bharat Mandapam as the default convention center, like for all these initiatives? It has the capacity to host all these big. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, I also had the idea that Bharat Mandapam actually in itself also can start the practice of making Raisina into a new World Economic Forum for Asia at least. But
Yeah,
okay.
because this year, right, this year's Raisina was so disappointing. Not a single panel was that good. I really would say openly. Last year was good.
Because the location is such a shitty location, right? If you are doing those
Yeah,
things in Marriott or
literally in
Novotel, like
Chanakya. Yeah,
your guest list is increasing, your delegation is increasing from all the countries with each year. Now you can actually make Bharat Mandapam as your default setting. Actually, now that you have actually built it with so much money, but that's why.
yeah.
Yes, Arun, how bullish are you regarding the new bonhomie between Taiwanese politicians and Indians, right up to till Prime Minister's office?
that's a good
Right. I
question.
mean, yeah, I don't have much insights into that geopolitics and the political aspects of it, but I think it's nothing. I mean, I don't tend to believe that there is something that's completely new or fresh, right? I mean, the power chip talks have probably started at least as early as 2022 January or something, or even before that. They had come and visited the Tolera and a couple of other facilities and things like that. In fact, what I had heard was that it took some time for them to finalize it. Partly also could be because of Tata's quite cautious approach to it. It could also be because of at that time all the PR was focused on Vedanta Foxconn, and so these guys probably felt that there's not enough money for for too many. But any case, the point is that I don't think the Taiwan cooperation part is completely new. Though the recent one, what is going on again, I have no idea. I mean, these are probably among the many things that I'm confused about what is going on. I mean, even the recent statement about the Dalai Lama and all that was made in India. So these are things which I don't understand. I just read it, and I hope that these are things that are going in the right direction. But on a slightly different note, and this I probably want to throw this back at Satvik, or it could be a question. And on the South Korea part, right?
Yeah.
It's a little interesting because the US has the other Chip 4 alliance, which includes South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, and the US. And over
Yes.
there, South Korea has been the toughest to tame because they don't want to. They have a lot of stake in China. They were a little pained when US said that no equipment supply to even any fab in China, even if it is so. And then they finally got the what is that okay for Samsung and SK Hynix to import some of those equipment for their fabs. So in general, South Korea is there. They cannot let go China. So in as much as US, when we say that, or when you said that US is trying to introduce South Korea to China, to India, it could also be, I mean, it can be in India's interest, but could it also be that in US interest, where they are trying to convince South Koreans that, look, I mean, there is also an emerging market and an emerging opportunistic place in India. So what
I
is
mean,
your thoughts on that, Satvik? I mean, is it
I,
just this? Is it, does US also have a reason to push India, South Korea to cooperate?
I mean, I guess, yeah, I would say yes, of course, the US has an interest in getting countries in East Asia less dependent on China. Whether this will be successful, I don't really think so. I think this still will be this dependence. But one of the key things is that South Korean and even Japanese companies have been burned in India historically. Like, you have, like, so you, especially in Andhra, you had the big Kia plant that was supposed to come up a few years ago, and that previous government just tore up. And this is supposed to be a big investment.
If you don't mind, Satvik, I will just intervene. I will tell you a story about it. When I was a research intern, I think during 2019-20, at, of course, Manohar Parrikar for MP IDSA, formerly IDSA in New Delhi. Now, I was at a East Asia center at the moment. At that moment, there was this Japanese delegation at that time, and they were actually quite pissed. They were complaining about two incidents. One is Uddhav Thackeray is like in Maharashtra blocking the bullet train project for, of course, the local political reasons, and YS Jagan Reddy actually cancelling on some of this, not only this Kia plant, but actually the renewable energy PPA agreements. Actually, that
Yeah,
was also in the news. In fact, Japanese ambassador had to write the letter. I think some of these investments have been actually continued after later. After I think. Central government managed to convince the Jagan Reddy, and of course the Uddhav Thackeray government is no more. But of course, in Maharashtra, those projects, Japanese projects, have now gone into a stage where even the next government wants to cancel it, they can't cancel them. So that's a good news, at least from the Japanese investment part in Maharashtra. But so this was quite a story at that time. Like it was for the domestic politics. I think our regional parties need a bit of strategic vision, actually, not only their local parts, but how their local decisions can actually impact the larger strategic adjustment, because most of these agreements were not just bilateral in nature, regular investments, they were strategic in nature, because Japan was given exclusive right to invest in Northeast in as a trade-off for some of these things, actually. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think that the when what happens here is when you have the US kind of like have these trilaterals with India, Korea, or India, Japan, or whatever, is it that the US has been showing, I guess, renewed confidence in India, in terms of, at least in industry, in terms of investment and stuff. And there is I guess, a corresponding dearth of confidence in India and other places just due to past history. So there's basically these connections happening, and of course, Indian companies and do this will have their own and make their own connections. But like, having the US be on this is a vote of confidence that, like, at least that other countries can see that, oh, if the US is having a major investment in India, or major diplomatic push for India, other countries will pay attention. And in fact, this is actually kind of what I mean. I don't think this is fully directly related, but like when you have something like 8 congressional members coming to Dharamshala and talking about the Tibet and the Dalai Lama, probably with MEA's, like, I guess I would say, stamp of approval, or at least implicit approval, like that's a very big signal that, like, the US has not said something on this kind of issue for 30 years basically, and now it's saying this again in India. So like that is a sign of diplomatic confidence. Even in, like, I see a lot of people talking about this diminished Modi government with a lower majority. I don't really see like what anyone in the US actually is showing less confidence in India in this. Like maybe there's
Yeah,
some
and
less confidence in some reforms, but like still that doesn't really. This is actually a vote of confidence in my opinion.
and to add on that just quickly before we end this part on MEA, uh, somebody remarked very immaturely that US Congress people from Senate and House of Representatives are, if meeting the Prime Minister and the External Affairs Minister, then why do our parliamentarians go? Well, then I'll just say, do our parliamentarians ever have a hearing for any prominent judge candidate in a High Court or Supreme Court? No. Do our committees have any power of sorts? No. Nobody in the political sides want to have it, nor the ruling nor the opposition. So like people don't even understand political setup, how it works. Like he's a US president is a total executive, so the Congress will always try to break the agenda. Therefore, these committees are very strategic. So I think it's a good thing that Pelosi met Modi, and I don't care. The Democrats might have a more interesting way to do it,
Yeah,
whatever
I mean,
their internal agenda
interestingly,
is. Yeah,
interesting. I would say more important than Pelosi is the House Foreign Affairs Committee chair, Michael McCall. He's a Republican, and he met Modi,
yeah,
and so this
yeah,
is like bipartisan.
yeah.
And not only that, like in India, 90% of the issues, no political parties actually opposes whatever ruling government does. Even in the 10% of the issues, they may make some noise. Eventually happens. I think unless and until it's as radical as India-US civil nuclear agreement that happened in 2008. But even something like that is no more that contentious, because once you have shifted the overturn window, there is no limit to it. Right now we have
Yeah,
bypassed those communist blocks, or some of the Islamist blocks. Like Palestine used to be a Islamist bloc. Now we have shifted the overturn window. I don't think even the future Congress government, for the vote bank purposes, would ever dissolve their strategic interests with Israel. The same with the communist bloc with the United States. Right now, two major vetoes have been actually shifted and they have been nullified. I don't think so. There is not any structural limitations per se in terms of strategic process, beyond maybe two, three, some big incident that may happen and few might make noise. But beyond noise, I mean, I think still the Western experts don't understand how Indian political system work. Actually, that is a
yeah.
big actually, uh, because all the regional parties actually never oppose. Even if they oppose, they never veto the strategic policy of the central government. That has
I
been the
mean,
one singular bipartisan thing.
yeah. I mean, even regional parties, they don't even oppose something like Chinese investment. Especially when you have companies like Vivo setting up plants here in India. You're like, so fine, let them set up plants, uh, and have let to have their workers come in to an extent and do all these things. But that's not really becoming a regional issue. Like, it's not like these Chinese workers are going up to Arunachal Pradesh and like taking photos or anything, right? Like if they're staying in like Haryana and like doing manufacturing or assisting with like plants in Tamil Nadu. I don't really think that's a security concern that these parties would be able to bring up anyways.
Yeah, but on Korea, Satvik,
Mhm.
now, I mean, I agree with you. It might, like as Arun said, it is getting very tough to tame South Korea, and if suppose Trump wins, it might be even more cacophonic. The relationship get more cacophonic. But don't you think recent North Korea Russia formal security agreement, like that's a game changer? I personally think, and in
Yeah,
fact, the boardroom discussions of Japan and South Korea were quite focused on. I mean, as far as maybe nuclear arming the countries, but those were limited to very closed boardroom discussions of. Now I think this opens up the space for actually quite open political discussion now.
yeah,
And I don't think more room for South Korea to resist American
yeah.
pressure to actually
Yeah. A
maybe
recent
I'm just
poll, I mean, a recent poll in South Korea like demonstrated, I think 70% of South Koreans want a nuclear deterrent. Several think tanks in South Korea have already proposed that, the South Korea should resume its nuclear program. That would be a very big step for South Korea and how it like opposes the US. But even then, it's like this is something that A depends on the administration in Washington, like if it is reliable enough for South Korea, and B, the South Korean threat calculus, if it's worth breaking such a norm. Yeah, I think it's too close to say, it's too soon to say whether this norm will be
but
broken, but like at least
But
but I
my point is not about if Seoul actually becomes nuclear power. That's the very very far issue. My point is South Korea's reluctance to actually join some of these tech initiatives or
Hmm,
actually joining the bandwagon of Washington's push. Maybe
yeah,
it can compromise on some of those issues because of the recent
hmm,
security agreement. I think there is a
yeah.
very less focus on how tectonic this Russian North Korean agreement is actually.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that affects South Korea's like tech policy calculus is A, like its economic interests in like China and everything, and its defense interests, but it's also another critical one is the um, uh, is the ability for South Korea to draft its policy in a way that aligns with U.S. interests, but also protects South Korea. That's the critical thing. That's why, like recently, South Korean defense manufacturer bought a shipyard in the U.S. in Philadelphia shipyard, and it's looking to buy shipyards all across the world to to boost manufacturing. A not just to assist the other countries, but also increase its own profitability. When it comes to India related tech initiatives, um, I would say that like South Korea's hesitance has I wouldn't say it's like anything opposing India. I don't think it's like an opposition to India, but at least it's negative business experience. And the the ways to get it involved in India again is to show positive experience. Like you have like I'll show you like when you look at these two, let's say Apple and Samsung having plants in India. Samsung had their plants in India like few years before the Apple Foxconn plant set up in India. The Samsung plants had been there for a while, but they didn't grow as much because they mainly served the domestic market. They didn't really go up for exports. Whereas Apple's targeted exports first, and you saw this big growth. Um, like
But I
so.
think Samsung is making some changes now. It has realized
Mm,
after Apple's success that it has to maybe recalibrate some of its priorities. And I think they are going for expansion, if I'm not wrong. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so like this is like there is a shift in South Korean thinking right now that previous experiences, negative they may be, uh it's now a new paradigm. Not just economically, but like geopolitically. There's pressure for resilient supply chains and also a supply chain that can that is frankly more independent of China than usual. That is in a core interest. Hmm.
Yeah. Now, can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. Now that we have discussed a lot of the critical tech part and the geopolitical aspects, let's come back to the maybe the last session on the AI part. So, Abhivardhan, this is where I think you will take over, maybe set the tone for
No,
the
I'll
discussion.
not take over. I want you to have layman approaches. मेरे को
In the
AI
sense that
ambassador का बनाओ.
maybe you can
Right. No,
explain
I
like
think Satvik should
no
begin and then I will add in because I'm a lawyer. I'm not somebody who builds AI or codes, does coding. But yeah, I
no.
think
What I mean is, maybe both you and Satvik can actually summarize a bit of where does India's AI discourse stands at the moment. Where is the policy heading? And I think personally, this is one area where there is less convergence and more divergence with the Western nations for India, and largely for the domestical political narrative perspectives, or like the whole the democracy, like the
yeah,
narrative, like the it's a thing beyond strategic, right? I mean, of course AI can be a strategic issue, and it is, but I think
yeah.
this is one area where there is a large divergence, at least in terms of political interest. So Abhivardhan and Satvik.
I'll let
Um,
Satvik. So yeah, but so to start with, I think maybe Arun can add wherever he wishes to. Satvik, what do you think about the industry policy understanding? Because what's happening is that what I see is a lot of time it's just investors and people in marketing or people in the economic side talking about AI policy and AI landscape in India. Turns out
Mhm.
that you need specialists in tech who actually
Yeah.
make people understand what should be done about AI at any stage. I mean, semiconductors is a different thing. It's a different ball game. We are even talking about infrastructure, commercial, and other layers. So I have views on policy. I talk about them so many times. But I want you to begin so that I can catch up. And I'll also talk
Yeah.
about how we understand it in judiciary, but that's another thing.
Okay. So when it comes to AI policy in India, that there's these kind. I would say there is, I guess, the legal side of things, but there's also, I guess, actual creation of wholly new models and everything. And so I guess like on the, I guess I'll start off on the legislative side because like um, that's where I kind of have some consulting kind of thing. Is that when you have like these upcoming acts like Digital India Act, or I think that's what the AI policy is going to be housed under, this Digital India Act. Although there may be a separate AI policy that gets passed somewhat later. This is that will be entering public consultation within the next few months. Um, the uh, I think that, to be honest, um, the like India's trying to find like this like middle ground between the US and the EU and how it regulates it. It doesn't want to be the level of EU stifling, but it doesn't want that such as this election has shown that like deep fakes and everything is an actual concern, not just for the ruling party but any party. This is a persistent issue that will need to be regulated in some way. Um,
And
that
and
will be on
and it
DT government.
actually had a real time implication in the recent election, though. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So that's quite big.
like there's going to be at least like a lot of political pressure to at least try to get these AI acts right and like try to get them out, because I think the judiciary wants tools to actually enforce laws. But the, regardless of how this actually turns out, in my opinion, I think that the fact that these were going to come out itself, that itself will be a positive, because the real concern for policy in India is shifting away from ad hoc notes that ministries give out. That I think has been one of the most unhelpful things that ministries can do, because it makes harder to plan. Like one example is like it like a regulation on an industry, even if it is restrictive, can still foster growth in that industry if it is consistent, and that consistency and that clarity matters. So if this actual policy can come out, regardless of how permissive or restrictive it is, if it is actually clear and doesn't get followed up by like 100 other notes and taking back the note and putting it back, um, if these can happen, that itself will be good for the industry. In terms of the actual making of AI, I think that so right now, India right now has, I think, become one of the largest nations for data centers in the world. I think it's coming up to the Japan's like capacity right now, and
Absolutely.
it's probably going to exceed Japan's capacity somewhat soon. Um,
Yes.
so there is at least a physical infrastructure for at least carrying on compute. Whether this is like in terms maybe cutting edge compute or not, I don't think that really matters. At least there's compute here. Um, the when it comes to the actual like companies that do it, that itself is a um, it's less clear there, because you have these big companies that are like like Tata, Reliance, that they probably have internal AI models that they're setting up, but are they going to like set up their own open AI or their own like their actual LLMs and stuff? I don't know. That is something where there's a lot less clarity on in industry, and to frankly see like whether even the existing AI models are wholly unique.
Yeah, Abhivardhan, before continuing, I want to also ask you to add on to the point. What is the actual execution capacity of lot of these digital bills, AI bills, etc. in India? Uh, because many a times I don't see the effective implementation of many of these digital laws actually. Even cyber security thing. I mean, when I was at MPIDSA, it being a defense think tank, though autonomous official under Ministry of Defense, it had a
Yeah.
horrible cyber security. Like anyone can hack that website and do anything they want. I mean, so
Yeah.
so please.
Okay. Before anyone assumes that I'm gonna be on a spree criticizing, I'm not gonna do that. I'll be very honest. I've been honest on this. I know whenever I talk about AI policy, everyone thinks I'm very anti-MeiTY. That's not true. I'm just like, MeiTY is something which is like an old age institution, so it has to break someday. It will have a restructuring. It's not me saying, it's something which is commonsensical. In fact, I'm working on a very interesting report. I'll come up with maybe in a few weeks, which is like, maybe an ISRO DRDO Gati Shakti model, some of parts of it which we can implement to come up with a new ministry. Because some government will do it. Maybe a UPA or ND government, whatever it is, or a NDA government under Modi or somebody will have to do it. Because, see, I agree with Satvik. Reliance and all these players have not specified whether they want to be an OpenAI or not. Now, if you even look at OpenAI, I think they're very spendthrift. They're just using a lot of NVIDIA resources and other resources, and Microsoft is just like, okay, fine, we are doing our own separate R&D work inside, because you have to understand all these MNCs have so many divisions that, Intel has its own division. All these companies have so many divisions. The problem is, LLMs have already reached at a peak. If you look at any of the because I use Perplexity every single day, the paid version, I love it. I'm a subscriber. I use all of these latest models. I can tell you very honestly that GPT 4o and this Claude 3.5 Sonnet, they just came in. Both are nice, but the limit that they have reached, the problem is, OpenAI and all of these have a lot of money, resources, and compute, but the LLMs are not showing, as per their benchmarks, something unique as a trend that, you are going to develop new LLMs. So if we say that for the coming 5 years, that this is the threshold right now, because innovation is stopping, which is the winter effect, so called, or tech winter, AI winter of sorts, in funding, maybe because the AI hype bubble is floating up, and there's also a problem that a lot of startups which raised money, OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., might acquire them. So that is also an interesting issue. The thing which India should do is focus on R&D. Now in India, the attitude and the whole discourse is so sad. People are like, okay, we don't have the funds. Just build a wrapper or app around a large language model and sell it. The problem is you can't patent an app. Can you? You can't. You can only patent a process of AI which is just recently proven by a US patent office. You haven't any recognized any patent position on this. Your your minister in Rajya Sabha said something that we have to do it under existing laws. Okay, what's the guideline? Nothing. So the problem is, in terms of competition, we don't need to be OpenAI. I think we need to be smart about using specific models which work for specific sense. But then if you are aiming for a large language model, it will be for multivariate use cases, too many things to do. Right? I think so. Strategically, we don't understand this point. And on regulation, I will tell you very quickly, I missed on that. We still have people filing FIRs under Section 66A of the IT Act. What can I say? That section was deemed as unconstitutional. Shreya Singhal judgment came in. Some Raebareli police thana did it. It's not me saying, it's just ANI or somebody reported it, right? Anyone in any police station does enforce 66 on free speech and all that and does it. It makes no sense. The Supreme Court said it, don't enforce it.
Hence my intervention.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you continue your points because you
No,
made
it's
this
fine.
point. How do you see this meshing with the new criminal laws also?
So with the new criminal laws, a problem will be that will you have district court judges remembering the new sections? Will the police be competent on that? I think it will be an adaptive process the police will have to go through, and it depends on a local issue, right? Even the Chief Justice of India.
No, but
who
what I mean is new
Yeah.
criminal law in sync with the modern digital discourse? That's what
I
my
think
argument.
I think a lot of things are a repetition of the IPC and all those things, but there are some new things which are introduced on electronic evidence and discovery processes, which are very obvious processes in forensic science, because India has a very good institution in Gujarat called the NFSC. NFSU, National Forensic Science University, under Dr. Purvi Pokhriyal and others. It's a good institution. It has a Lucknow campus as well, and Shakuntala Mishra University, and it has a Delhi campus in NLU Delhi. It's a good campus. It teaches police officers pretty well on cybersecurity and a bit forensic techniques in sync with the digital world. So, like a basic understanding can be taught to police people. Judiciary, I don't know. They are too huge, and I don't want to commit contempt of courts. I'll not commit on the courts and the judges, but police officers, definitely they can become better. And yeah, cybersecurity cells are a different issue, but I think
Yeah.
uh, yeah, but just quickly, I think Satvik wants to intervene before you go on. Even on the IT Act, the problem is the IT Act is so old, and the understanding of technology policy in India at the level of a massy level is, you know what? Okay, some theft has happened, phishing has happened. I have done some purchase on Zomato. Basically, e-commerce and basic phishing and all those basic practices, I would say. They don't, and I think that is also a problem in the bureaucracy. That, you know what, a lot of bureaucrats have no idea, which is, I think, I tried to say in the beginning that, you know what, localized strategies are important to understand emerging tech, because a lot of people take it like a catchphrase, and that's the whole problem with digital tech. But yeah, Satvik, over to you, please.
I also think that one of the big things in order to actually get like mass adoption, like not even mass adoption, but at least like a like to get research interest and also to get commercial interest in AI, is that like one of the things that I guess Nandan Nilekani has been doing is he has this one project called People Plus AI. And he's been also working with the government to set up their open cloud compute, I think, data software, data network, which is going to be at least a set of cloud compute that is used as a public resource, and that and that like small commercial initiatives can get time on that, or researchers can do it. I think that things like this and initiatives like this will actually be the things that are needed to get AI research done, and also awareness of AI done in education. And these are the things that actually will need to happen. I mean, we see these big deals like 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 Kiran Nandini Corporation buying $1 billion of GPUs or something. Great, that's a good thing. But it's also, you're not going to get the actual, I guess, like amelioration of tech and AI capabilities into a country unless you get because the problem that Indian education and Indian research faces is that there's just a much lower base. You have you have US labs with millions of dollars of funding to get AI. You have you have Bill Gates setting up centers in universities and all these things. That's good. It's good for the US, but that just means that the US is very capital rich. Similar for China. You have a lot of AI compute, even at small universities. They'll have their dedicated servers and everything. But when it comes to like medium, small universities in India, like is there that even that level of things? If not, they're going to have to take advantage of public initiatives, public resources like this. So I think, if anything, this AI policy by the government needs to actually prioritize the accessibility of AI for the public, for the public masses. Because large corporations, they'll find their own way. They'll buy their own servers. They'll buy everything. They have their own existing commercial relationships. It's the actual people getting the AI out to people is actually what's important.
In fact, I can tell you that even for buying some basic GPUs for compute purposes, the basic cost that an Indian can pay is 7 to 8 lakhs. It could be even more, for more, because sometimes for more capacity and for more computational ability, you may have to pay, I don't know, something around 30 lakhs or more to begin with. And the overall investment is 50 crores in Indian rupees. So that explains you that, even if somebody is in a local engineering college pursuing computer science or data applications and just wants to do something in AI, the person will not be able to do, because there's a lack of accessibility, computation, and it's a whole problem of economic rights.
Yeah.
And yeah, Sarvam AI is one startup which is trying to do it to begin with. And yes, the cloud People Plus AI is also doing some incredible work. I kind of understand their notion of work. But yeah, I think from a governance point of view, it has to be clear that if you have so many data centers, go ahead with that. Keep having more. Like in Uttar Pradesh, people were just posting in UP Desco that, oh, we have data center in Raebareli. Also, okay, yeah, bingo, level one. This is just level one. It's not level 10, right? You need
Yeah.
to come up with more. What's new about it? So I think
Yeah.
we need to be a bit ambitious about it, specifically region wise,
Yeah. And
and that's yeah.
And if anything, like these proliferation of data centers only makes it more important that India gets better energy capacity and more reliable compute, a more reliable energy for the power for these data centers. If your data center goes down because of local like load shedding, what's the point? It doesn't
That's
matter
the point.
if that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there, I mean, like we see things at least like in the U.S. example. Like I think Nevada or Wyoming, Microsoft is setting up its own nuclear plant, just for a data centers to set up there. They're setting up small nuclear plants just for that. Uh, I think India will have to really like we'll have to really start exploring like either getting coal or getting nuclear, like doing these things that actually because the way that I see Indian energy policy to meet this AI semiconductor defense tech problem, I think that these things will have to be some things are uh, that are long-term goals. But like if you don't have the energy plans that actually take those into account, there's a lack of coordination. Because the way that I see the energy plans, the in terms of expansion of capacity or base capacity or nuclear or XYZ, they are growing at a rate that takes into account the similar style Indian growth for the next few years, in the sense that it's service-led growth, and it's a growth that doesn't really support the manufacturing capacity that in manufacturing, but also even energy intensive capacity that India really needs. And if it doesn't take that into account, then like you're not actually going to be able to power all these like fancy initiatives that we talked about.
Yeah, I
That's
think the answer to that, some of that stuff lies in the domestic political discourse. I hope the new Electricity Act, especially focusing on rationalization of domestic smart meter connections and the discom reforms, especially the cash flow between the gencos and discoms, are sorted out smoothly, because large part of the problem lies in the timely procurements of coal, etc., due to the lack of enough cash in the when they actually need it. So the whole problem lies in the cash flow actually. So there is that. But anything more on AI? I mean, I really found it interesting that the ISET fact sheet had only very generic mention of artificial intelligence within quantum
but
computing and
I would
all that.
I would say that's a good thing, because right now quantum is also evolving, so you don't need to be open AI and just coming up with some half baked stuff. I think it's a reasonable thing to begin with, because if you if you look at a basic policy level, I'll be very honest on this. Maybe deep fakes because election integrity and misinformation. Beyond that, maybe certain other things about consumer law practices. Beyond
Mhm.
this, you don't need to regulate AI for the coming 5 to 10 years at all. Right now in India, all you need is much better understanding what is evolving, what can be done. Because so Satvik will agree with me, there are certain sectors in which AI can be used very easily. I'm not even talking about Gen AI hype. I'm talking about real AI applications in B2B level, like banking already happening in fintech. Okay, because we all know UPI is a free model, so you need to create a business model around a free model. That's exactly how people plus AI works. Interestingly, second, agriculture, Kisani. I mean, I just say keep. You need some Pradhan Mantri AI Vitran Yojana, so that you help farmers in getting
Har,
data
har,
and
har Ghar AI Yojana, Har Ghar
Har
AI
Ghar
model
AI
Yojana.
Yojana or
Yeah,
Pradhan Mantri AI Yojana.
No,
yeah.
no, but like
Well,
in
that's one of
serious
the
terms,
insights.
now that you mentioned UPI, do you think a publicly owned, robust AI model, like national AI model, is possible? Like in lines of ONDC, UPI. Of course, the jury is still out on the success of
Right.
ONDC, but our model is
Look,
the
look,
public digital stack that is basically free for all. Like no one owns the IP, but like it works because there's a lot of, I mean, India scale 1.4 billion people when they are injecting the data every day. So the model works on itself, how to improve. So
I mean,
so
here's the thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, 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 no. Okay, okay. Let me. Okay, so I'll just take a minute, then you can, if you, yeah. So sorry, yeah. So just one point. I'm so sorry, Sathi. So one basic understanding which I found in is that a lot of AI use cases are B2B. It's not like a toy that you go on OpenAI, ChatGPT, and type. It's a productivity approach, right? So you can have ecosystem of AI use cases with some computational support, like an India stack, and then you can ensure in any sector you want to do. It's like it will literally make AI democratized across places, because you can do it in agriculture, energy, health tech. Legal tech will only happen when the judiciary is open to reforms. They're not open to reforms and digitization that way. Only the Chief Justice of India is, sadly. Civil courts will not do. So legal tech is a loss, hopeless case. But health, fintech, yes. Agriculture, yes. Energy, yes. Entertainment, yes. All that creative stuff, Canva and all. So yeah, if you build focus on productivity ecosystem, I think India can do a lot. So let
Yeah.
Satvik now add. I'm so sorry for.
It's okay. So when it comes to, I guess, like a national AI model, I mean, the way that I see the purpose of the government is to provide the infrastructure. UPI itself, that's infrastructure. So that means anything that's built on top of UPI. So you have stuff like, Flipkart, you have your phone pay, everything that, like, these are private companies taking advantage of public infrastructure. And there is like, and when you have these things like ONDC come up, that is like an actual like separate model. I think that it's an important thing because it forces companies to compete, to keep them innovative. Like if Flipkart and Amazon are just going to keep rent seeking and just don't actually create new innovations, if there's at least a public competitor in that sense that it's not trying to push these companies out of the market, but at least provide an alternative, that then these companies will be forced to differentiate themselves. And I think that when it comes to AI, you can have like I'd rather the government be in the business of providing data centers and compute rather than like trying to get into this B2B business or these AI services. I think that let companies find whatever there is, but just provide that basic compute that
No,
like.
but like Satvik, the reason why I emphasized on that point is recently there have been so many controversies. Like there's an inherent bias in the way models work. Like certain
Yeah.
socio-political commentary made, maybe theories of something or perceptions of made be social commentary, racial commentary, etc., with a certain societal lens to it. Now, having a
Mm.
national AI model can help actually the government or the larger polity of India to maybe save its own ethos within the system, right? I don't think private company would actually care about those things.
I mean, in my opinion, I think that when it comes to these like a national AI model itself, then like what would be, I guess, the use cases? Because if it's an AI model like that is specifically geared to make a, let's say, like an Indian specific use case, sure, that may be fine, but like you're going to have private companies that try to outcompete it even within that itself. And I think that itself, it may not be as necessary because I mean, there's
Okay.
plenty of local private companies that have this kind of Indian interest and stuff, and then they'll find it. I mean,
And
like the way that U.S. models are particularly sensitive to U.S. Political interests. Uh, Similar ones, I think that if you have a really Indian data set, you're going to have an Indian model that comes up on its own from a private company, and I'd rather
yeah,
have that happen.
and to add on that before Aditya speaks, just to add on that, what are you suggesting is already being done in China? So I'll tell you. So basically, socialist values, Xi Jinping values, the whole recommendation engine of TikTok is actually espousing so those kind of content which are actually around those Xi Jinping value system. Now, in the case of Meta, Instagram, and all those, the Democrats who have effective control over big tech companies, that is just true politically, they are doing it in a very interesting way. They have all these sophisticated guidelines and bylaws. Most of us, even I as a lawyer, would not be able to read because they are just so dense and their UI is not good. You can't read the pages. And the whole thing is they're doing it in a sophisticated, decentralized way, saying, okay, these companies will do it and they have their own say and they will do it in a business practice way. And on security aspects, they will partner with DOT, which is what, like Anthropic's policy head is actually from Department of Defense. And the national security advisor guy has just joined OpenAI's board. So what we need is to define sovereignty, and I agree on the bias part because I use these models. I know how biased they are, but the one solution is uh, we can't, ban them. The best we can do is first of all customer sensitization, and second, just ensure that for text based and all these things, we just understand what are our consent based data protection rights. Because for example, if I'm prompting an AI model 10 times and the AI model is trying to force me to give some information without my consent, I think that should be a matter of sovereignty, and that definitely should be a matter of data protection. Say, by we are an Indian user, we are prompting 10 times, why are you forcing us to give us some information, right? Because the flaws will happen with these mid journey and all these models. You can't do anything about it, right? And in the case of Gemini, what happened was Google employees actually compromised Pichai's leadership, and they completely affected the way Gemini was working. That's why it was. So I hope I did not
Hmm.
break
Yeah,
the mouse.
I think
I,
before we go for the final comments, the last point I would like, were you going to say something, Satvik?
I would just say that, like, if you're going to make something like an AI model that is actually competitive on a global scene, it can't just only be for India itself. It needs to be
No,
addressing
no, no.
global
I agree.
crises.
Like,
I mean, in the sense that, like, you'll have to make, I guess, like the Indian data context or Indian context attractive for other people.
Yeah.
And my personal view on this is that you can only do that by being more open, you being more that's the way that the US has gotten a lot of cultural dominance over the world, is because they're just a more open society. And when you compare it to someone like China or the Soviet Union, this popular cultural strength was something that the US was able to use. And if India wants to get a similar level of cultural diffusion into the world, it will need to be a more open society, a bit more progressive society. But that's just my own personal take on this.
yeah, but before going to the final comments from all, Abhivardhan, the final opinion I want you from is, what is the level of the private language models like Krutrim, etc.? At what stage are Indian private AI research, R&D, or language models, etc., etc.? I mean, not it doesn't have to be just language models. AI research is also on other fields, right? So, what is the Indian private discourse? Where how matured we are, basically?
Okay, so I'll let Satvik intervene, but I'll just be very quick. Uh, I will not comment on Ola Krutrim. Best of luck to them. May God bless them. May our devtas bless them and 1,000 wishes, whatever. No comments on Ola Krutrim. I think Sarvam AI is the only model which is working hard on this. They have been developing this, and there's done one project under Agami India lawyers, which is Open Nyay, and People Plus AI obviously is there. But like Satvik was talking about a unified, an open perspective on this, it just reminded me. So under the Digital India program, Bhashini has become a very interesting initiative where, because of Bhashini, which is a kind of a DPI thing, you actually have language translation, transcription, and all those kind of tools. Language productivity or language tool stack, as you say. That section is actually gaining a lot of value in India, because you need all that transcription work, translation. You need, if you want something in lyrics, you want it in romanized, it's in Telugu or Kannada but romanized, then you can have it through these AI tools, right? And that's actually an interesting industry. But I know even Unacademy launched something. Congratulations to them, 1,000 wishes, may they do well. I have no comments. But as Ola and all these people do, uh, they have to realize that they can't be just a marketing hype. They should also focus on reliable commercial use case. And I think if they do that, they can actually grab a lot of foreign clients.
Hmm.
Like, I have no problems with Ola, Krutrim, or anyone. I think the chatbot of Ola Krutrim is just not good enough.
Yeah.
And
In fact,
yeah.
like if you think of just competition wise and becoming a commercial use case, that's why Zoho and everyone is actually kind of doing expansion in Africa as a B2B software, because it's responsive enough and cheap enough for the African use case, and it's a good product. So if other Indian companies could do something like that, that's how you get like an Indian company to do this.
Yeah, uh, that's true. And I think if we focus on that, then we are good to go. Because that's the whole thing with, we focus too much on marketing and information economy, thinking that, what, let's get the leads, let's get that thing, instead of focusing on real use case. And even if, for example, even OpenAI doesn't have a product properly, right, whatever subscription it charges you, it's like, we are doing research, you're paying us for accessing some specialized things we are offering you. Therefore, yeah. And it has created what I call as a AI for preview model, and you can do that in India too. but I think it has to be done in a sophisticated manner, because there will be a lot of interesting issues coming up. So in Gen AI and education, there's a lot of scope. Somebody can become a Khan Academy in a proper way, maybe integrating certain things, but goals have to be specific. I think a lot of things is because of I don't want to talk about an ad by a very prominent company showing that there's a generative AI art tool we are providing you for Rafael Nadal, or I don't know, the other guy, Cristiano Ronaldo or something like that. And I tried that tool. I just put make a background featuring Prabhas, and it made such a poor caricature. Then I was like, why are you making an ad on this and destroying your reputation as a prominent IT company of India? So I don't know, right? It's so sad. And a few companies are trying it, but I think we should also prioritize research labs. They have GPU capacity problems. They need a lot of help. But yeah, Jay
So,
Prabha.
so Abhivardhan, I wanted to just say he was mocking me basically, but yeah, beyond that, uh, I wanted to actually discuss EV thing also, the EV developments, but I guess we don't have time unless because the whole Elon Musk thing, he was supposed to come to India, then he didn't come. Then whatever is happening there, will Tesla actually come, and where does the EV cooperation land? I mean, there's a larger issue on that, but is
Yeah,
EV actually a bilateral diplomacy thing, larger thing, or is just a commercial thing for India?
Satvik.
I mean, I mean, EVs are something that I wouldn't say as as much bilateral diplomacy. This is something that like each country has its own interest because the US is fiercely protective of its own auto market, and India is also has the 28% GST on automobiles. So I think that each country is there's too much self-interest to get like bilateral cooperation on this, but we'll see.
But what does that say actually, that Elon Musk actually ditched India and actually he went back to China? Because many say he is being short sighted, being still bullish on China. Because if tomorrow Trump wins, actually it might things can get ugly actually between China and US, and he might actually impose export controls even on EV. You never know actually, knowing Trump. So I don't know, like, is he being short sighted, Elon Musk?
I think he is in the sense that like, the Chinese EV market is much more competitive than the US one, and it's frankly one where Tesla is being able to compete less and less. So I think that, I don't really understand what he's doing there and like why. I mean, if he didn't go to India while India tried to lay out the red carpet for him, that's his own fault. And other EV companies are going to be eager to take advantage of that in India. So Tesla may try to come back, but like, I really don't see any reason to lay out a second red carpet for them.
Yes, so Arun, I will start with you. The final comments. I think you have been silent for a very long time, so let's start with you. Any final words on, of course, your area of interest and any other areas that we all have discussed? Yes, Arun.
Yeah, I mean, I've been naturally silent because it was mostly on AI and stuff like that. And I think just one point that either stood out or I want to make it stand out is that uh, any effort in AI or any of these fields, my opinion is that let's not do it for the sake of we want an Indian way, we want an Indian biased model or whatever. If it happens organically, well and good. Otherwise, always have a global outlook. I mean, look what happened with Coup, right? I mean, I took an account in Coup and I hardly use it. So, to the extent that Coup might still be used for local social media chats and things like that, so great. So, but if that should not be your only aim. You should always try to capture the global market in whatever field it is, and even if it is EVs, for example, or semiconductors, or even if you're starting a small supply chain shop in India for semiconductors or any of these, you should have a part of your energy dedicated to exports. So this is and it's the Prime Minister has said it in his idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat very clearly: make in India, but for the world. So as long as we keep that in mind, and I think all the policies and efforts are tuned into that, it I think slowly things will start falling in place. In general, India, India probably one of the very few countries in the world which, or major countries in the world which hardly had any revolutions. Revolutions don't happen in India. We only evolve. We progress slowly. We evolve, which is also a good thing because we don't break down so easily. Also, right? So
No, no, but Arun, I disagree. Digital stack is kind of a revolution for emerging markets, actually.
no, I didn't
For
mean
like,
in that sense. I meant like people's revolution, right? So those things don't happen in India. So we are more used to, अरे यार, इस जन्म में नहीं हुआ तो अगले जन्म में होगा. So that kind of an attitude, right? So which has its bad side. It has its positive also, that we are much more resilient. So that would be my final word or takeaway in it. That let things slowly, organically evolve, with the government acting as a facilitator or as a pusher, and the commercial side or the industrial side of India picking up on that and enabling it.
yes, Satvik, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with Arun right here. Like that if India really wants to get it, become a tech power, it needs to. It cannot only look at India. In like India's, like I think one big problem that a lot of Indians say is that we have a big market, we have a big country, we could cater to ourselves, but that is never really going to be a recipe for success on a global stage. That you need to be globally minded, not just with let's say with AI models, but like semiconductors, right? Like don't just look to supply Indian companies. Try to get Japanese, South Korean, Indonesian, US. Like go everywhere you can. And I would say that also extends to defense tech. Places like when you have a country like Russia, like burning diplomatic bridges wherever they can. China scaring a lot of other people. There's a real niche in the market for with like affordable defense technology, and that is something that India really needs to prioritize because an opportunity like this, where like two major players in the market are not accessible to a large portion of countries, that's not going to come again if someone else grabs it. So India needs to be the one that proactively tries to seize it, and if it doesn't, that'll just be a shame.
Yes, Abhi.
I completely agree with Arun, and I would say that we should stop hyping around by saying we are a big market. We should focus on the potential of penetration. And the problem with information economy is that a lot of information warfare also affects our ability to understand what is our market competitiveness and technological competitiveness. And we don't invest in that. I think very few people understand this. They think it's just a cybersecurity context. No, it's also about strategic decision making in technology development. And I think I've already said, I will say it again. I wish, our Devtas giving 1000 blessings to Ola Krutim and all those ventures. I have no comment on them because who knows what happens. I don't wish to comment. But I really root for MSMEs and startups in AI. And I wish our research labs in IITs and ISCs have the compute capacity. They don't have that right now. I think it's very less right now. And I wish they do well. They have the government support because in R&D, you have to research labs actually can do a lot, and big players will have their way naturally. I mean, I agree with Satvik. I mean, Reliance and all of these already have a lot of money. They have already done a lot of acquisition of GPUs. They don't have the problem. Whatever they do, congratulations. I mean, that's okay. But I think we have to strengthen our MSMEs and startups in some ways. So, yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I have two final comments on like as a summary for all this. First one would be I disagree to an extent with Satvik and Abhivardhan that we should not hype up about the big market part. I think, I mean, of course, it's not the only selling point, and it couldn't be the only selling point. But sometimes you can't just beat the numbers. Scale and numbers tell the story of its own, basically. And I mean, look at this way. We were like $2 trillion economy like a decade ago. Now we are almost like 3.7, and within next 5 years we will expand this economy by 70 to 80%, provided that the dollar rupee depreciation is like not that drastically different. So this would be around like 6 to 6.5 trillion dollar economy. Now this is the stage, I think, where the compounding benefits of like India's size, the compounding starts giving the benefits at the larger macro level. And at some stage this will reflect in the marginal utility of companies, innovation, your investments, etc., etc. Because we also discussed like the China part, right? Earlier, China can afford to do some things. That's because just because of its scale. Of course, the structure, political systems are different, but something cannot ever beat the scale and the size. And of course, India should not be just happy with the scale it has. It has to actually take the leverage of the scale it has. And with infrastructure, thank God that the infra focus is right, but infra is also not the only thing that has to be used to facilitate it, like regulations, opening up more, etc., etc. So other policy regimes have to support it. But I think this is the time when actually the scale will start showing its results, because there's a huge difference between a $3.5 trillion economy and a $6.5 trillion economy. Like the it changes the whole argument, the game, everything basically. But beyond that, the second part, I think one big miss of this government, and I have always consistently emphasized this, and it is linked to directly, indirectly to everything we have discussed till now: capacity absorption, like the limitations, execution, etc., etc., R&D, research, etc., etc. That is, I mean, excluding for pandemic, even though the Modi regime has given us 6-7% consistent growth, excluding for like one couple of years of pandemic and the economic slowdown we had due to NBFC crisis, it never percolated down to the informal sector and the MSME, small sector, startups, etc. Of course, startups had the good run in the last couple of years only, and that has been the missing link in the larger positivity, be it be R&D or like I agree, like the yes, big companies do R&D, but most of the actual stuff happened through the small companies, like the little researchers, scientists who do the stuff. And that is the missing link in the India story under Modi. Of course, demonetization disrupted it, then NBFC crisis came in, and when the recovery was supposed to happen, pandemic came in. So 2017 to 2022, that 5 year window actually took the bite out of the story. Actually, yes, we are doing well at the macro level, but the within that macro, stable macro structure, there is something that has to happen. Thankfully, we had couple of good non-disruptive years. Government also didn't do anything bad. I hope next few years also continue this, so that the MSME, small companies recover well, some consumption recovery happens, and that actually supports the all the things we discussed, because eventually everything ties up to the India economic story, and India economic story will be incomplete without the MSMEs starting to kick in their contribution. Big companies will always be selfish, so the larger work has to be done by the small players. So I hope the Modi 3 will focus on that. Yeah, I will just stop there. Yeah.
Great,
Anything
Jakki.
else? Yes. Yes. So, yes, Arun.
No. I mean, thank you. I think that you summarized it well, and the MSME part in particular. I think a lot of people who, we have to bring it back to the